For most Americans, the economy is a familiar series of numbers. The price of a gallon of gas, the weekly grocery bill, the interest rate on a dream home, and the number on that paycheck at the end of the month. We work hard, we save, we invest, and we trust in a system that has made America the most prosperous nation in history. But there's a critical truth that most of us don't realize. Hidden behind every transaction, every savings account, every expression of our national wealth is an invisible superpower. An exorbitant privilege that has shaped the modern world and serves as the true foundation for the American way of life. That superpower is the dominance of the US dollar. This isn't an abstract topic for economists in Washington. This is the story of the most powerful, effective, and least understood weapon in America's arsenal. A weapon that is now facing a coordinated, systematic assault from rivals around the globe. The erosion of the dollar's power is not a distant possibility. It is a slow-motion earthquake, a process happening right now that threatens to shatter the very economic ground we stand on. To understand this existential threat, we must first understand the extraordinary power we hold. The dollar's dominance was not a historical accident. It was deliberately engineered from the ashes of World War II. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, the Allied powers gathered to build a new global economic order. The result was a system where the US dollar, backed by gold at a fixed rate of $35 an ounce, became the center of the financial universe. Other currencies were pegged to the dollar. In essence, the dollar became the world's reserve currency. The real turning point, however, came in 1971. Facing the costs of the Vietnam War and domestic social programs, President Richard Nixon shocked the world by unilaterally severing the last link between the dollar and gold. The gold window was closed. From that moment on, the dollar became a fiat currency, its value backed not by anything tangible, but solely by the full faith and credit of the United States government. Many predicted this was the end of dollar dominance. They were spectacularly wrong. In a move of geopolitical genius, the Nixon administration negotiated a deal with Saudi Arabia and subsequently, the rest of OPEC. The deal was simple. America would provide military protection to the oil kingdoms, and in return, OPEC would price all of its oil sales exclusively in US dollars. The petrodollar system was born, and it changed everything. Any country in the world that wanted to buy oil, the lifeblood of the modern economy first, had to buy US dollars. This created a permanent, artificial global demand for our currency. It was no longer just about faith, it was about necessity. Nations had to hold massive reserves of dollars to ensure their energy security. They held these reserves in the form of U.S. Treasury bonds, essentially loaning money to the U.S. government at very low interest rates. This is the exorbitant privilege that former French Finance Minister Valéry Giscard d'Estaing spoke of. It gives America unimaginable advantages. Global demand for U.S. debt. America can run massive budget deficits year after year because there is always a ready market to buy its debt, Treasury bonds. This finances everything from the world's most powerful military to social welfare programs, without having to raise taxes to a comparable degree. Lower interest rates. This constant demand keeps interest rates in the U.S. lower than they would otherwise be. This means cheaper mortgages, cheaper car loans, and more manageable credit card debt for American consumers. Businesses can borrow to expand at a lower cost, fueling economic growth. Exporting inflation. When the Federal Reserve prints trillions of new dollars, as it did during the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID-19 pandemic, a significant portion of those dollars flows overseas to meet global demand. This helps absorb inflationary pressure, allowing the U.S. to export its inflation to other nations. Sanction power. Perhaps most importantly, controlling the plumbing of global finance gives the U.S. the ultimate economic weapon. By cutting a country off from the dollar-based payment system, like SWIFT, Washington can cripple a rival's economy without firing a single shot. This has been a powerful tool of coercion used against Iran, North Korea, and most recently Russia. For over 50 years, the world has played by these rules. Americans have benefited from a system that allows us to consume more than we produce and borrow on an unimaginable scale. We've grown accustomed to cheap goods from China at Walmart, German luxury cars on our highways, and the ability to finance a lifestyle that much of the world can only dream of. It has all been propped up by the global dominance of the dollar. But now the rules of the game are changing. For years, whispers of de-dollarization were just fringe discussions. But Russia's invasion of Ukraine in 2022 and the unprecedented Western response turned those whispers into a roar. When the US and its allies froze roughly $300 billion of Russia's foreign reserves and cut its major banks off from SWIFT, a chilling message was sent to the rest of the world. Your dollar reserves are not truly yours. They can be confiscated at any time if you fall out of line with Washington's interests. For nations like China and many in the global south, this was a moment of awakening. Dependence on the dollar was not just an economic inconvenience, it was a critical strategic vulnerability. It placed their national sovereignty in the hands of a foreign power. The incentive to create an alternative became urgent. An informal but increasingly powerful alliance is forming with one common goal: to break the dollar's hegemony. China, as the world's second-largest economy and America's primary strategic competitor, is leading the charge. Beijing is not trying to replace the dollar with the yuan overnight. Instead, its strategy is to create a multipolar currency world where the yuan plays a major role, gradually eroding the dollar's influence. Their tactics include settling trade in local currencies, building alternative payment infrastructures like CIPS, and developing a digital yuan. Russia, pushed into a corner by sanctions, has become a willing partner and a laboratory for de-dollarization. It has shifted the vast majority of its trade, especially in energy, to the yuan and other currencies. The BRICS bloc of emerging economies has become the focal point of the de-dollarization movement. The bloc recently expanded to include major energy producers like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Iran. The BRICS Plus bloc now accounts for over 40% of the world's population, around 30% of global GDP, and, crucially, nearly 45% of the world's oil production. They are openly discussing the creation of a new BRICS reserve currency, possibly backed by a basket of commodities. The clearest evidence that this shift is underway is what's happening with gold and oil. Central banks around the world, led by China, are dumping used treasury bonds and buying physical gold at a record pace. They are diversifying away from dollar assets they cannot fully control. At the same time, Saudi Arabia, America's key partner in upholding the petrodollar system, is now publicly entertaining the idea of accepting other currencies, especially the yuan, for its oil sales. This process will not happen overnight. The dollar still has immense advantages. However, the trend is unmistakable. Like a river changing its course, the shift is slow but steady. So, what would actually happen to the average American if the world began to abandon the dollar? The picture is not pretty. It would be a painful recalibration of America's place in the world and its citizens' standard of living. Imagine a chain of falling dominoes. First, the dollar would plummet in value. As global demand for dollars falls, its value against other currencies would drop according to the basic laws of supply and demand. The trillions of dollars held overseas would begin to come home, flooding the domestic market. Next would come a tsunami of inflation. This is the most direct and painful impact. Look at everything in your home: your iPhone, your Nike shoes, your Samsung TV. Much of it is made overseas. As the dollar loses value, the cost to import all these goods would skyrocket. The inflation we've recently experienced would be nothing in comparison. The purchasing power of your salary and your savings would be severely eroded. Then interest rates would skyrocket. When foreign nations are no longer eager to buy U.S. debt, what will the government have to do to finance its massive deficits? It will have to make its debt more attractive by offering much higher interest rates. The Federal Reserve would also be forced to hike rates to fight hyperinflation. A 30-year mortgage could jump from 7% to 12%, 15%, or higher. House prices would collapse. Credit card rates could soar to 30 to 40%. America's credit-based economy would grind to a halt. This would lead to a stock market crash and a deep recession. With borrowing costs soaring and consumers having no money to spend, corporate profits would evaporate. The 401(k)s and retirement accounts of millions of Americans would be wiped out. Companies would lay off workers en masse, sending unemployment soaring. Finally, the economic consequences would be followed by a decline in geopolitical power. And America, grappling with hyperinflation and a depression, would no longer be able to afford a globe-spanning military. Its ability to impose sanctions would become meaningless. The American century would truly be over, not with a bang, but with the whimper of a printing press that has lost its magic. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is the inescapable logic of economics and power. The de-dollarization process won't happen in a single night. It may take 5 years, 10 years, or 20. But the direction of travel is clear. America's rivals are acting deliberately and strategically to escape what they see as the golden handcuffs of the dollar system. For decades, Americans have lived in an economic bubble created by the privilege of our currency. We have believed our prosperity was unbreakable, the sole result of our own ingenuity and hard work. The truth is far more complex. We have benefited from a global system that we designed and controlled. Now that system is being challenged. The 50-year party is coming to an end. This warning is not meant to spread panic, but to serve as an urgent wake-up call. Our leaders need to face this reality and start making hard choices. And as citizens, we need to understand the true nature of our prosperity and the threats it faces. Ignoring these warning signs is like ignoring the tremors before a massive earthquake. The invisible superpower that has protected the American way of life is fading. The question is no longer if it will happen, but when, and how prepared will we be for a world where the dollar is no longer king? And the answer to that question will define the future for every man, woman, and child in this nation.